Welcome back to Utah Trikes. I'm Davy, and today I want to let you in on a little secret. You know crank arms? The arms that your pedals are attached to? Like these things right here? Yeah, so most people don't know that you can get these in different lengths and sizes, and it even greatly affects your ride, adding a whole new aspect of personalization to your trike. If you want to hear more about the hidden possibilities of crank arms, make sure to stick around and we'll get right into it. So what does a crank arm do besides connect your trike's pedals to the gearing? Well, cranks can be one of the most important parts of your trike. The main function is that they allow for the power put into the pedals by your legs to move the gearing, utilizing the leverage created by the pedal's distance from the center of the crank, which is what we call crank length. The crank length is the distance between the center of the bottom bracket and the center of the pedal axis, which is basically just the distance between the pedal and the center of the front gearing. There are a variety of crank lengths available, but the most common ones you'll find are between 170 to 175 millimeters range. But you can usually find some crank arms lower or higher than that at 150 and 200 millimeters, and just everything in between. Now, you're probably wondering how much just a couple millimeters of a crank arm could influence your ride anyways. And the answer is just a little bit of extra or too little length of your pedals can overextend your muscles and start to cause pain. When you're looking for a trike and you're being measured, you are going to be positioned so you're sitting comfortably and the length of the boom will be adjusted so your pedal at maximum extension will be just short of having your leg fully extended. You're doing this for two reasons. One, you're getting as much power possible from each stroke of the leg when it's able to utilize all the momentum and power built up from the full push of your leg. Two, by not having your leg fully extended, it reduces the chance that your feet may slip off of the pedal. But if there's too much distance on the boom and your leg is becoming fully extended each rotation, this can result in potentially locking your knee in each stroke, which will cause you to become tired sooner and could result in injury. Once you've been sized to your trike, even if the boom is adjusted correctly, you may find that your ride can become uncomfortable quickly, and sometimes may even be a little difficult to walk after the ride because your knee's bothering you or your hips are sore. So why is this happening? It's because most bike part manufacturers just go with the standard crank lengths. Because there are so many sizes of people, it's a lot simpler to stick with an average length. Now, if you're having this problem, there are companies that make shorter or longer cranks to adjust for your comfort. So if you're having knee and hip issues, this may be something you should look into. Finding the right crank length is a little tricky to determine and takes a little bit of time and some dedication on the part of the rider. If you're going for the most performance-enhancing adjustments, it will be a lot of tinkering to get your trike adjusted just right. But for the average rider who's looking for a little extra comfort, you'll be adjusting your crank arm length and then your X seam to fit properly. So now that we know why crank arms need to be adjusted to fit the rider, how do you know when your trike needs that crank arm upgrade? The most obvious way to tell, besides just general riding preference, is to keep an eye out for hip and knee pain. With improperly sized crank arms, you're more likely to experience discomfort on your ride. If this is happening to you, often a new crank set will be the way to go. If you're feeling pain in your knees, this is usually the cause of too harsh of a knee angle caused by longer crank arms. If you have a harder time bending your knees, a longer crank arm will bring your knees up to a harsher angle. When you adjust the crank length to be shorter, the angle is much less harsh and easier on the knees. If your hips are sore, then you're probably compensating for improper crank arm length by rocking side to side. This could be for a variety of reasons, but the most common issue would be that with longer cranks, you might not be able to extend your legs fully, or deliver enough power to keep your cadence up. In response, you may be shifting from side to side to compensate and meet the full extension of your crank arms. If you're noticing these kinds of things while riding, then shorter crank arms may be the solution, or at least part of the solution, to reduce stress on key hinging points on your body, like the knees and hips. A benefit of shorter crank arms is it can help prevent pedal steering. Pedal steering is usually caused from mashing your pedals, or in other words, all of your power is only going into the downward stroke. This can lead to overexerting yourself to get the right power output and general discomfort. You can prevent this by having a properly fitted crank arm length, or if you have a way to strap your feet to the pedals like clipless pedals and bicycle shoes, you will also gain a more even power output on the downward stroke and upward stroke, as well as more seamless stroke for the entire rotation. Pedal mashing and its effects are much more likely with longer crank arms, as you're trying to release stress and pressure on your leg that is on the upward swing by shooting your knee out and away from your body to alleviate the pressure on your legs. To relieve the pressure on the upward leg, you will end up rocking your hips to send power to the extended leg, thus mashing the pedals on the downward stroke. All of this causes an imbalance on the trike, not to mention the body, and can create a swaying sensation as you pedal. While it is true that you're not getting the same amount of force or torque per individual stroke of the pedal as you would with longer cranks compared to shorter, but you might actually get an overall better power output in the long run. You're able to keep your legs aligned properly and get more continual motion by having your feet slightly closer in the pedal rotation. This can also be applied outside of comfort and more in the realm of the type of riding style you're trying to achieve. For most people, crank arm length doesn't make a huge difference on your ability to ride, but it can influence how comfortable your ride is for the type of riding that you're doing. If you're a racing-oriented rider, longer crank arms are going to influence your ride more than shorter crank arms. The length of the crank arms allow for more leverage on your pedals, which will make keeping a consistent speed easier to achieve with a lower cadence. You will also have slightly more bend in your knees, which can deliver a higher physical power input, giving you more speed with a consistently lower cadence, taking more effort to push the crank, but letting you get more out of it. But as mentioned in the last section, larger crank arms will cause more stress to be placed on your knees and hips to achieve this higher power output. But if your main goal is to go fast, a more intense workout is expected anyways. If you're a more casual rider, a shorter crank length could be the better option for you. Shorter crank arms decrease the amount of torque needed to make a full pedal revolution and are great for changing pace. When you pedal with shorter crank arms, your pedal revolutions will be shorter and maybe feel a little off at first as you get used to it. But they're easy to adapt to with their low muscle demand. Whichever size cranks you go for, it's important to note that it can feel a little strange at first, and you just got to go on a couple rides to fully get used to the new crank style. With all of this crank arm info, you may be wondering if there's an easier way to get different crank arms, or maybe you aren't needing crank arms for a specific performance style at all, and are just trying to get a trike that fits you properly beyond the usual trike's limitations. For that, we have a solution, and that is our Revolution crank arm shorteners. This is a crank arm edition that we designed here at Utah Trikes in Springville, Utah. Its function is to give you a simple way to make your crank arms shorter without having to buy all new crank arms. These crank arm shorteners are great too because they have multiple points of adjustment. So if you're experimenting with what crank length is right for you, you have the room to try out 4 different adjustments to see what's right. It's also great if you have multiple riders that will be using your trike that are slightly different heights. Shorter crank arms can also substitute for a shorter boom to a point, so if you and your trike partner have slightly different heights, these shorteners are great for quick, versatile boom adjustment alternative without having to adjust your chain. And even for single riders with mismatched leg lengths, you're able to adjust each pedal at different distances to make up for the difference between your pedal reach. But the biggest uses our customers find for these shorteners is to shorten a boom past its limits. A boom can only go so short, even when we cut it down to even shorter than standard. But sometimes for a particularly small rider, it still isn't short enough for them to pedal comfortably. So the crank arm shorteners are great for shortening that boom just enough to make sure our riders can have an ideal riding experience. This is also really helpful because some cranksets don't allow for crank arm swapping, most commonly the FSA Gossamer crankset found on the Cat Trike models. The Revolution crank arm shorteners have adjustment settings of approximately 19mm to approximately 41mm. That's an adjustment range of about 22mm, giving you the equivalent of a 143mm crank arm on its lowest setting with the standard Cat Trike crankset, farther than you could go with any standard crank arm adjustment to accommodate for an even wider range of people. The crank arm is a part of the trike that is often overlooked, but can make a big difference in your comfortability and maybe even be something that you've been missing this whole time. Crank arm adjustments are fairly simple, but it's important to note that on adjustment, when your crank arms become shorter, it can alter your pedaling and power output, similarly to if you adjusted your front gearing. For example, every 10mm that your crank arm is adjusted shorter, it's the equivalent of going 2 teeth bigger on your front chainring. This is why some riders may find it harder to get up steep hills and have to shift down with shorter cranks more often. Now, many of you out there are riding for the exercise benefits as well as being able to enjoy time outdoors. If you're not able to enjoy your ride, or your time is limited because of discomfort in your knees or hips, changing the crank arm length may be beneficial to your time on and off the trike. This adjustment can help with recovery time due to better body alignment. Here at Utah Trikes, we offer a variety of crank arms from 152 to 175mm, as well as our Revolution crank arm shorteners. For most people, a small adjustment of around 2.5mm won't do much, but a change of around 10mm will definitely do it for you. Having a crank length that's right for you can make a big difference when riding. You can take unneeded pressure off of your legs and be more worried about having a good time than your body hurting. While it may take some time in the beginning to figure out what crank length is right for you, and if you should change crank lengths at all, it's worth it in the end. Not only will you be able to have a more comfortable ride, but you'll see improvements in speed and a better fit for you and your trike. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to stay up to date with all things Trikes, make sure to subscribe to our channel and make sure to hit the little bell icon to stay notified of our weekly uploads. If you found this video informative, please consider leaving a like. And if you have any personal experience with crank arm adjustments, consider leaving a comment down below and let us know. We would love to hear about your experience. With that, remember to relax, spin fast, and ride Trikes. I'll see you guys next time. Gotta keep it moving to a town that's right for me. Boop, beep, boop, 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 boop. Crack. Again.
Oh, my knee!
My knee! Okay, again.
Don't lock your knees like this. You'll be in pain.
This mic is making me itch. Ow. It's like pinching. It's like it's stinging me, like a bee. Like that one time a baby hornet got stuck in my shirt when I was putting it on. I don't know how it got in there, but I was putting on a shirt and I was like 11 and it like hurt really bad right here. And it was like, ow, ow, I took it off and there was just a baby hornet. It was like this big in my shirt. It was like shooting me with a gun. Yeah, do it again.